Iran just attacked Israel.
Iran launched a large-scale attack.
The sound and images of sirens there over Tel Aviv, and the Israeli military says missiles have been launched from Iran into Israel.
Of over 180 ballistic missiles directly from Iranian soil at the state of Israel.
Obviously, this is a significant escalation by Iran, a significant event.
It's a major attack, Dana, and it's an escalation. It's an escalation of this war beyond.
This was the largest ballistic missile attack against Israel in history. This comes after Israel assassinated Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, along with most of Hezbollah's top command. Yesterday, the IDF also launched what it calls a limited incursion into Lebanon that should only last a few days. The same day, the Israeli Prime Minister released a video directly addressing the Iranian citizens and calling on them to rise up against the government. Before you get into that clip, though, please be sure to hit the like button below and share this video on social media. Covering any war is a risky move on YouTube, as it's not considered advertiser-friendly, so videos can get buried in the algorithm. So your likes and your shares, they help us out a lot. Now let's get into the clip of Netanyahu calling on Iranians to rise up.
I speak a lot about the leaders of Iran, yet at this pivotal moment, I want to address you, the people of Iran. I want to do so directly, without filters, without middlemen. Every day, you see a regime that subjugates you make fiery speeches about defending Lebanon, defending Gaza. Yet every day, that regime plunges our region deeper into darkness and deeper into war. Every day, their puppets are eliminated. Ask Mohammed Def. Ask Nasrallah. There is nowhere in the Middle East Israel cannot reach. There's nowhere we will not go to protect our people and protect our country. With every passing moment, the regime is bringing you, the noble Persian people, closer to the abyss. The vast majority of Iranians know their regime doesn't care a whit about them. If it did care, if it cared about you, it would stop wasting billions of dollars on futile wars across the Middle East. It would start improving your lives. Imagine if all the vast money the regime wasted on nuclear weapons and foreign wars were invested in your children's education and improving your health care, in building your nation's infrastructure, water, sewage, all the other things that you need. Imagine that. But you know one simple thing. Iran's tyrants don't care about your future, but you do. When Iran is finally free, and that moment will come a lot sooner than people think, everything will be different. Our two ancient peoples, the Jewish people and the Persian people, will finally be at peace. Our two countries, Israel and Iran, will be at peace. When that day comes, the terror network that the regime built in 5 continents will be bankrupt, dismantled. Iran will thrive as never before. Global investment, massive tourism, brilliant technological innovation based on the tremendous talents that exist inside Iran. Doesn't that sound better than endless poverty, repression, and war? From Qom to Isfahan, from Shiraz to Tabriz, there are tens of millions of good and decent people with thousands of years of history behind them and a brilliant future ahead of them. Don't let a small group of fanatic theocrats crush your hopes and your dreams. You deserve better. Your children deserve better. The entire world deserves better. I know you don't support the rapists and murderers of Hamas and Hezbollah, but your leaders do. You deserve more. The people of Iran should know Israel stands with you. May we together know a future of prosperity and peace.
But before we dive into the details of the current attack, we have to understand why Iran decided to do this in the first place. There's obviously this current war in Gaza that escalated regional tensions, but the adversity between Israel and Iran lies much deeper. This is just one of a long line of back-and-forth attacks that have been ongoing for decades now. Ever since the 1979 Islamic Revolution happened in Iran, the two nations have been bitter enemies. This is because Israel is aligned with the West, which Iran is fundamentally opposed to. The Islamic Revolution itself was anti-Western, as it ousted the US-installed king for a new supreme leader. This new regime felt that anything related to America was evil, referring to Washington as Great Satan and Israel as Little Satan. The Ayatollah also believed that it was wrong for the Jews to settle in Palestinian territories. This marked the beginning of a new Cold War between the governments of Tehran and Jerusalem. Although the direct fighting only erupted in 2024, there have been decades of proxy wars. Israel regularly gets in trouble with the Palestinians and its Arab neighbors, a dynamic that Iran has exploited as a third party. Through the funding of various militias and terrorist groups, which Iran calls the Axis of Resistance, it has been able to add fuel to the fire and put pressure on the Israeli government. First, we should talk about the country north of Israel, namely Lebanon. In 1982, Israel invaded southern Lebanon in its conflict with the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Palestinian militias had used the fragile country as a base of operations, as it had been caught up in a civil war since 1975. Repeated Palestinian attacks from across the border sparked a retaliation from the IDF, who started to occupy the south. A side effect of this was that it left Lebanon in an even weaker position than it had been in before. The Lebanese government lost the tiny amount of control it had left, and various militias began to form. The Shiite population, representing about a third of the population, began to back the Hezbollah group. This was a very interesting development for the Iranians, because Hezbollah was the perfect proxy group. It shared the Shiite religion, and it had the same ideological and strategic objectives. So the Ayatollah Khomeini gave the group funding, training, and weapons. At first, this was used in the fight against the Israeli troops remaining in southern Lebanon, who finally withdrew in 2000. With the territories it gained during this conflict, Hezbollah created a state within a state. This was never the group's end goal, though. One of Hezbollah's stated goals was Israel's final departure from Lebanon as a prelude to its final obliteration. Tensions were building up across the Israel-Lebanon border until a new conflict erupted in 2006. After 34 days of fighting, the UN passed a resolution that Israel would retreat and that Hezbollah would be disarmed. The latter part never happened. Iran continued to prop up the terrorist organization, and it has become the most powerful non-state actor in the world, perhaps stronger than the Lebanese army itself. In 2018, Hezbollah had a $700 million budget, financed by Iran. Most of its strength comes from its rocket arsenal of up to 120,000 pieces. However, the northern front would remain relatively silent as the Iran-Israel proxy war shifted to the south. The more radical Hamas militia took over the Gaza Strip in 2007, separating the area from the Fatah-controlled Palestinian territories on the West Bank. Iran liked this development because Hamas was willing to use force against the Israelis, unlike Fatah. So, Iran began to give money, military training, and weapons to Hamas in Gaza. This included rockets and missiles. It also helped to build the tunnel network under Gaza, which was crucial for the underground warfare tactics of Hamas. The terrorist group called Palestinian Islamic Jihad also secured Iranian funding and resources for its operations in Gaza and the West Bank. In 2020, the US estimated that Iran was giving about $100 million a year to Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Israel currently puts the number at $350 million annually for Hamas alone. If anything, Iran was successful in stirring up a lot of chaos. The war in Gaza would escalate in 2008, 2012, 2014, 2018, 2021, and finally in 2023. In all these instances, Hamas fired rockets from Gaza that were designed or even made in Iran. In the West Bank, there would also be constant turmoil between militias and the IDF. So both Gaza and Lebanon have been a part of Iran's proxy war with Israel. And that's not even all. After Syria plunged into civil war in 2011, Iran started to prop up the Syrian regime of Bashar al-Assad. It created tons of bases in the country, but as you might know, Syria has a border with Israel. Unsurprisingly, a lot of these Iranian bases are very close to the Israeli border, posing a threat to Israel's national security. In the recent series of escalations, this whole situation in Syria played a huge role. There's also an Iran-backed militia in Yemen called the Houthis, who occupy the western part of the country. They've also gotten involved in the proxy war by striking Israel from afar and attacking numerous vessels on the Red Sea. We should also mention Iraq, where Iranian-backed militias are a constant threat to US bases. America is Israel's main backer and has been targeted in the regional tensions. With this in mind, we can understand how it could have gotten to this point. Iran has been putting pressure on Israel for decades, and after the Gaza war escalated, the genie's come out of the bottle. The breakout of the war in October of 2023 was already very scary, because it was unclear how Iran would react with its axis of resistance. The Israeli invasion in Gaza triggered a response from Hezbollah and the Houthis, albeit a limited one initially. Hezbollah fired tons of rockets and drones over Israeli borders, but at a low intensity compared to what it's capable of. Still, the back-and-forth fire led to multiple deaths, tens of thousands of people being displaced, and many more living in fear and further escalation. The Houthis in Yemen were relatively quick to start their own anti-Israel campaign by attacking ships in the Red Sea and occasionally attempting to strike Israel. It was clear that the proxy war was heating up. Israel's tactic in this conflict was very different from the axis of resistance, though. It used its advanced airstrike and assassination capabilities to go after high-ranking officials. In December of 2023, Israel killed a top Revolutionary Guard commander in one airstrike in Syria and 11 other IRGC leaders in another airstrike on the Damascus International Airport. Israel killed yet another 5 IRGC elites in January of 2024. These actions could be seen as punishment for Iran's involvement in the Gaza war, but it could have also been a response to the continued threats from Hezbollah and the Houthis. In April of 2024, Israel took it one step further. The IDF hit the Iranian embassy in Damascus, Syria, which is a war crime. In the process, they killed a senior leader of the irregular Quds Force unit, as well as 7 other high-ranking figures in the Iranian military. We'll never know the exact calculations behind this move, but the Israeli command must have known that they couldn't get away with this without an Iranian retaliation. 12 days later, on April the 13th, the Revolutionary Guard came with its widely anticipated reaction. It sent a barrage of more than 300 cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and drones to Israel, which sounds more dangerous than it actually was. 99% of the weapons were destroyed, many before they even reached Israel. This was possible because of the country's incredible strong air defenses. The Arrow system's anti-ballistic missiles, Israel fighter jets, and the Iron Dome system worked together to annihilate the threat. US forces in the area also helped out. No one was killed, which was perhaps Iran's intention. The supreme leader wanted to show his own people that he took revenge, but he didn't want any further escalation at this point in time. After all, if he wanted to, he could have used Hezbollah's rockets and done much more damage. After the initial shock was over, Israel had to decide what would be a measured response. The US and other international parties didn't want a reaction that posed a serious risk of starting a war. So, on the 19th of April, Israel would come with a measured response. It attacked and damaged 3 targets near an Iranian airport, including a military base, a radar, and an air defense system. This was more to prove a point, showing that Israel had capabilities that Iran didn't have. The Iranian media downplayed the attack and said that no damage was done. This was an excuse for not planning another retaliation. For the next few months, the whole situation seemed to calm down slightly. By slightly, I mean that there were still battles with Hezbollah near the Lebanon border, with the Houthis on the Red Sea, and with other militias in Syria and Iraq. But in July, things would start heating up again. There were a series of high-profile assassinations, much more humiliating than the ones that occurred before. On top of that, there were major strikes by both sides. On the 13th of July, the architect of October 7th, named Mohammed Daif, was killed in Gaza. A week later, the Houthis killed 1 civilian and wounded several others in a long-range drone attack on Tel Aviv. As a response, Israel set fire to Yemen's port city of Hodeidah, killing 3 and inflicting a lot of damage to the Houthi rebels. Hezbollah also carried out a deadly attack, launching a rocket, killing 12 children in the Golan Heights. 2 days later, on the 30th of July, a Hezbollah commander and founding member named Fuad Shukr was killed. Allegedly, he was involved in the Golan Heights attack. The most important assassination of all happened 1 day later, though. On the 31st of July, the head of Hamas itself was killed in Tehran. Ismail Haniyeh was there for the inauguration of the new president, which the Israelis knew beforehand. They were able to plant a remote-controlled bomb in the guest house he was staying at 2 months before his visit. Not too long after, Iran and its axis of resistance promised to punish Israel for this move. The US responded by expanding its military presence in the Middle East, smelling trouble. Lastly, and surely most importantly, the assassination of the Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, who was killed in Hezbollah's headquarters. We will have more videos coming as more reports come out of the Middle East, so be sure to subscribe to catch those.